What if the person who fears love the most actually wants it the deepest? Avoidantly attached individuals spend their lives running from what they secretly crave: connection. Not the shallow kind that can be easily managed or escaped, but the kind that reaches past their defenses and makes them feel alive again. They've built their identity around control, controlling how close others get, controlling what they reveal, controlling how much they feel. But beneath all that control lives a quiet, restless ache, a longing to be seen without being suffocated, to be held without being owned, to be loved without losing themselves. The irony is painful. Avoidants fear the very intimacy that could heal them. They don't run because they don't care. They run because they care too much. Their nervous system interprets closeness as danger, vulnerability as exposure. So they retreat. They minimize. They make themselves small and distant, convincing the world and themselves that they don't need anyone. But emotional independence isn't the same as emotional safety. Deep down, they long for someone who can meet them in that fragile middle ground. Someone calm, grounded, and emotionally sovereign enough not to chase them, yet strong enough not to disappear when they pull away. To trigger an avoidant's deepest desire for connection, you don't need to force closeness. You need to embody freedom. You must be the person who honors both space and intimacy. The one who says, "I want you, but I don't need to control you." This balance disarms the avoidant's defenses because it mirrors what they crave most: love without captivity. When you stop reacting to their distance and start respecting your own boundaries, something shifts. The avoidant begins to feel safe around your steadiness. They start to wonder why your presence doesn't feel threatening, why your peace feels magnetic. In that stillness, you awaken a part of them they've long buried, the part that remembers what it feels like to trust, to hope, to connect. And that's where it begins, the slow unraveling of their fear and the quiet return of their longing. If you want to better understand how to deal with avoidance, then subscribe to the channel to know everything. Every avoidant carries an emotional contradiction inside them. They appear distant, but their distance isn't emptiness, it's self-protection. From the outside, they look detached, unbothered, even cold. But internally, they are often overwhelmed by the depth of what they feel. They've learned that love, in its rawest form, can hurt. That closeness can become control. That needing someone can turn into losing yourself. So instead of reaching for love, they retreat into safety. They choose silence over confrontation, space over connection, and independence over intimacy. But that choice comes at a cost. Because beneath their calm exterior lies an emotional ocean they rarely touch. And within that ocean, something stirs, a deep, aching desire to connect, to be understood without being consumed. It's not that they don't want love. They just don't trust it. Every time they've opened their heart in the past, they felt unseen or overpowered. That pain becomes a script. If I stayed attached, I can't be hurt. It's a coping mechanism disguised as confidence. Yet even the strongest emotional walls can't silence the human need for closeness. Avoidants crave emotional safety more than anyone else. But for them, safety doesn't come from reassurance. It comes from freedom. The moment they feel pressured, analyzed, or chased, their nervous system sounds the alarm. They start to pull away, not because they've stopped caring, but because they're trying to regain emotional control. The paradox is that what they truly want, a calm, steady bond, can only exist when they stop fighting for control. And that's where the right kind of connection can change everything. When they meet someone who doesn't flinch at their distance, someone who can hold space without judgment, something new happens inside them. Their guard begins to soften, not through persuasion, but through presence. They start to feel emotionally safe for the first time in a long time. It's in that space, between fear and desire, that their deepest longing awakens. They begin to want what they've always avoided, a connection that doesn't cost their autonomy. Avoidants are drawn to emotional independence like moths to quiet light. To them, independence feels safe. It's familiar. It doesn't demand. It doesn't chase. It doesn't beg them to be something they can't yet be. Emotional independence is the energy that tells the avoidant, "You are free to stay or to go, and I'll still be okay." That kind of energy doesn't suffocate, it breathes. And for the avoidant, that's oxygen. In relationships, avoidants often expect others to crumble under their silence or distance. They've learned that people usually react by reaching out more, apologizing for things they didn't do, trying harder to fix the emotional gap. That reaction reaffirms the avoidant's belief that closeness equals pressure. But when they meet someone who doesn't react like that, someone who doesn't chase or cling, they're forced to confront an unfamiliar feeling: respect. Because independence, when genuine, isn't indifference. It's self-possession. It's calmness that doesn't collapse when someone pulls away. It's love that doesn't beg. And that disrupts everything the avoidant expects. Suddenly, they're the ones feeling off balance. They start wondering, why doesn't this person need me? Why aren't they affected by my distance? The answer, that you value peace more than chaos, triggers both their fear and fascination. You see, emotional independence mirrors what the avoidant secretly desires but can't express: a relationship where both people are whole. They've spent years equating love with emotional dependency, so when someone loves them without trying to control them, it feels revolutionary. The independent partner becomes both a mirror and a mystery, a reflection of the freedom they crave and the connection they fear. And in that paradox, the avoidant's guarded heart starts to open. Slowly, quietly. They may not admit it, but your calm becomes addictive. Your stability becomes magnetic. You represent the one thing they never thought possible: closeness without losing control. The more they feel your independence, the safer they become in their vulnerability. Because now, love doesn't look like a trap. It looks like choice. Avoidants don't fall in love through intensity. They fall in love through safety. Not the kind of safety built on constant reassurance, but the kind that whispers, "You don't have to run here." Their nervous system has spent years equating closeness with danger. So when they meet someone whose calm presence doesn't demand, doesn't push, doesn't crowd, it starts to confuse them in the best possible way. For the first time, connection doesn't feel like captivity. It feels like quiet relief. Safety, to an avoidant, isn't found in being understood instantly. It's found in the silence between two people who don't need to fill every gap with words. It's found in patience, the willingness to give space without resentment. When someone offers that kind of safety, the avoidance guard begins to loosen. And beneath that armor lies a heart that's been waiting a long time to be seen gently. You see, desire for the avoidant doesn't emerge from chaos or emotional highs. It emerges from peace, from knowing they can be themselves, flawed, distant, unsure, and still be met with understanding instead of pressure. When they sense that you won't punish them for needing space, their walls begin to shift. And as those walls lower, something unexpected happens. Desire awakens. It's subtle at first. They start to miss your presence, not because they need validation, but because they associate you with calm. Your steadiness becomes a safe, emotional frequency they want to return to. The more they feel your consistency, the more their fear transforms into curiosity. They start to wonder what it would be like to stay close, to not run this time. That's the turning point. When the avoidant begins to connect safety with intimacy rather than control, they start to crave what they once avoided. They begin to realize that connection doesn't have to mean surrendering independence. It can mean expanding it. In that realization, they discover that the freedom they've always protected themselves with was never meant to keep love out. It was meant to find love that feels safe to let in. For the avoidant, attachment doesn't happen suddenly. It seeps in quietly, almost against their will. They notice it in small moments. A message they replay more than once. A silence that feels heavier than usual. A thought that lingers longer than it should. They begin to care. And caring, for the avoidant, is the most destabilizing feeling of all. When they start to attach, the emotional control they've built their identity on begins to slip. What once felt effortless, pulling back, going silent, pretending not to care, starts to feel impossible. They still try to maintain their composure, but internally, they're in conflict. One part of them wants to lean in, to feel the warmth of being understood. Another part wants to retreat before that warmth becomes too much to bear. This internal tug-of-war is the avoidant's private chaos. I want you, but I'm terrified of what wanting you means. You'll see it in their contradictions. They might reach out one day and withdraw the next. They'll open up a little, then act like it never happened. These shifts aren't manipulation, they're emotional overload. Vulnerability activates their deepest fears, being needed too much, being trapped, being seen in ways they can't control. But beneath that fear, something deeper is forming. They're beginning to bond. The avoidance attachment is rarely loud. It's quiet, careful, and often hidden beneath defensiveness. Yet, the signs are there. They start noticing the details, your tone, your reactions, the space between conversations. They care about your mood, your silence, your distance. And though they won't admit it, they start organizing their inner world around you. This is where desire turns into connection. They might not have the words for it, but their actions begin to show it. Checking in, remembering things, staying present even when it feels uncomfortable. The very person who once feared closeness is now craving it, though they don't yet know how to hold it. And that's the paradox of avoidant attachment. The more they feel, the more they fear. But the more they fear, the deeper they feel. Love doesn't melt their walls. It confuses them until those walls stop making sense. Avoidants survive by control. Control is their safety net, the emotional guardrail that keeps them from feeling too much, too fast, too deep. It's how they regulate closeness, dictate pace, and preserve a sense of independence in relationships. But the moment real attachment begins to form, that control starts to tremble. And for the avoidant, that's when everything begins to feel both terrifying and alive. When they care deeply, their emotions stop obeying their rules. The same strategies that once protected them, silence, withdrawal, detachment, begin to backfire. Pulling away doesn't bring peace anymore. It brings discomfort. Ignoring messages no longer feels powerful. It feels hollow. Suddenly, their distance stops being freedom and starts feeling like loss. This is the silent breaking point. The avoidant realizes, often without words, that control was never safety. It was isolation. And the person who made them feel safe enough to lower that control becomes both their calm and their chaos. That person represents a new kind of vulnerability, the kind that doesn't demand, but invites. Internally, the avoidant starts to oscillate between two emotional realities. One voice says, "You're losing control. Back away before it hurts." The other whispers, "Stay. You're safe here." This inner conflict can make their behavior unpredictable. They might become quieter, more introspective, or even seem irritable, not because they've lost interest, but because they're confronting feelings they've long suppressed. Vulnerability, to them, feels like exposure. But it's also the moment they begin to experience real intimacy for the first time. And here lies the paradox. When an avoidant begins to trust someone enough to lose control, that's when their love becomes genuine. Because in that surrender, however reluctant, they're no longer performing connection, they're living it. The transformation isn't dramatic. It's subtle, a longer text, a softer tone, a slower goodbye. But in those tiny moments of emotional honesty, they're letting you in. Not because you forced them to, but because your steadiness made it safe to do so. That's how avoidance begins to heal. Not through confrontation, but through the quiet courage of vulnerability. Avoidants have patterns. They can predict the rhythm of most connections. Closeness, tension, retreat, silence, reset. It's a cycle they know by heart. A survival loop that lets them feel in control. But every once in a while, someone breaks that rhythm completely. Someone who doesn't chase, doesn't panic, doesn't crumble. Someone who holds their ground without closing their heart. That's the moment the avoidant realizes you're different. It doesn't happen instantly. It happens in quiet, ordinary interactions. When you respond to distance with calm instead of fear. When you respect their silence instead of filling it. When you stay kind but never self-abandoning. Those moments speak louder than any declaration of love because they tell the avoidant one thing they never believed, that they can exist in a relationship without being consumed by it. That realization shakes them. Because in their world, people always wanted more attention, more emotion, more availability than they could give. They learned to equate love with demand. But with you, it's different. You bring presence, not pressure, clarity, not chaos. And that stability begins to unravel their certainty that closeness is dangerous. At first, they'll test it. They'll pull back, go quiet, or retreat into their familiar shell. But when you don't chase, when you let them breathe, they notice. They start to see that your peace doesn't depend on their availability. That realization is magnetic to them. It triggers something primal, respect mixed with longing. You've shown them that love can coexist with freedom, and that is the one truth they've been craving without knowing how to ask for it. The avoidant begins to look at you differently. They replay the times you didn't react, the moments you gave them space, the way you stood firm in your worth. They realize you're not trying to control them. You're simply being real, steady, grounded. And that steadiness becomes the first emotional language they actually understand. This is the moment they begin to trust you, not through words, but through observation. Trust for them isn't spoken. It's proven through consistent calm. And when they sense that your calm is real, not performative, their fear begins to quiet. For the first time, the avoidant stops running. They pause. They breathe. And in that stillness, connection begins to take root. Safety changes everything. For the avoidant, love has always been tangled with fear. Fear of engulfment, of losing self, of being misunderstood or trapped. But when they finally feel safe with someone, that fear begins to dissolve. It's not sudden. It's slow, cautious, almost hesitant. They start letting small pieces of themselves emerge, fragments of truth they've hidden for years. The walls that once protected them start to feel unnecessary. And that's when something extraordinary happens. They begin to love, not out of need, but out of trust. You'll notice the shift in their energy more than their words. Avoidants rarely announce their vulnerability. They demonstrate it through subtle openness. They might start initiating conversations, reaching out first, or letting you into parts of their world they've never shared. They begin to linger longer, emotionally and physically. The pauses between texts shorten. Their eyes soften when they look at you. These aren't dramatic gestures. They're quiet admissions of trust. What's happening internally is profound. Their nervous system, once wired for withdrawal, begins to rewire for connection. The emotional patterns that once screamed danger start whispering safe. They start realizing that love doesn't have to mean self-abandonment. That connection doesn't have to cost them control. They discover they can be loved and be free at the same time. And that revelation is life-changing. But even as they soften, fear doesn't vanish. It transforms. They still have moments of doubt, flashes of old panic when emotions feel too raw. But this time, they don't run as fast. They stay a little longer. They start to regulate, to breathe through the discomfort instead of escaping it. They're learning that safety isn't found in distance. It's found in presence. The love that grows from this safety is grounded, not impulsive. It's built on respect, not dependency. And it's in this sacred balance between freedom and closeness that the avoidant begins to experience what they've been craving all along, connection that feels like peace. For them, this is love in its purest form, not an emotional storm, but a quiet surrender to something that finally feels safe enough to hold. If you love someone with avoidant tendencies, You've probably felt the tug of war, the closeness that feels magical one moment, the distance that follows the next. You've probably wondered, what did I do wrong? But here's the truth, nothing. The key to staying connected with an avoidant isn't about doing more. It's about being more grounded, more self-aware, more emotionally independent. Avoidants are hypersensitive to emotional pressure. They withdraw when they sense that someone's peace depends on them. That's why your greatest power is your self-possession. When you show that your emotional world doesn't collapse in their absence, it disarms their fear. It tells them, you're safe here because I'm safe within myself. That message, even if unspoken, is magnetic. It allows the avoidant to feel connection without feeling captured. But staying connected also means refusing to shrink yourself. It means having boundaries that protect your peace while still leaving room for love. You can be compassionate without being a caretaker, patient without being passive, kind without losing your center. Healthy love doesn't mean tolerating avoidance. It means understanding it while maintaining your dignity. When you remain emotionally steady, you model the kind of safety the avoidant never learned to trust. You show them that love doesn't demand, it invites. That closeness doesn't suffocate, it expands. That silence doesn't have to be punishment, it can be space to breathe. Over time, this emotional balance redefines what intimacy feels like for both of you. But it's crucial to remember, your steadiness isn't a strategy to fix them, it's a reflection of your self-worth. You are not their healer, their therapist, or their emotional anchor. You're a mirror, showing them that love can exist alongside freedom, that connection can thrive without control. In that balance, both people grow. The avoidant learns safety. You learn sovereignty. And together, you build a connection that doesn't drain, but deepens. That's how you love without losing yourself, by being a presence, not a pursuit. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop reaching and let them return on their own. For the avoidant, pursuit feels like pressure. The harder someone tries to pull them close, the deeper they retreat into distance. It's not rejection, it's self-preservation. Their nervous system equates intensity with danger. But something remarkable happens when you stop chasing and start allowing. When you release the need to control the pace, you shift from chasing connection to embodying it. And that's where healing begins, both for them and for you. Letting them come to you isn't about playing games or withholding affection. It's about honoring emotional timing. Avoidants need space to translate their fear into understanding. When they pull away, it's not always a sign that they've stopped caring. Often, it means they care too much and don't know how to process it. Your stillness gives them the room to regulate. It tells them, I'm not going anywhere, but I won't abandon myself waiting for you. That is the balance they never knew existed. When you hold that balance, the avoidant begins to feel something new. Trust. Not the kind built from constant reassurance, but the quiet kind born from consistency. They start to realize that love doesn't demand pursuit, it invites return. And when they do come back, and they often do, it's not out of obligation or guilt. It's out of choice. Because safety, once felt, is unforgettable. And for you, letting them come to you is an act of self-respect. It's choosing your own peace over emotional chaos. It's understanding that love doesn't need to be forced, it only needs to be safe. If they're meant to meet you in that safety, they will. And if they don't, your calm will still be your home. That's the quiet truth of healing. You don't pull love closer. You make space for it to find you. When you learn to do that, you not only awaken the avoidant's deepest desire for connection, you awaken your own. So if this message resonates with you, if you've ever loved someone who runs from what they crave most, share this with them. Comment your thoughts below, subscribe for more, and let's keep uncovering the truth behind avoidance together.